Brandon Thurston from WrestleNomics is up next, and we're going to follow Brandon with John Pollock from Post Wrestling.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone.
But we can't ignore the math, okay? We can't ignore the data.
Go on Google Trends, type in your name, then type in mine. You're a straight line, I'm a pyramid.
I like the very direct question on that.
Television ratings, downward spiral. Buy rates, plummeting.
The time is now to turn the math around.
And hello, everyone. Welcome to 2025 here on Pollock and Thurston. And you know, me and Brandon, we put about 5 seconds of thought into the title of this show. We went with our surnames, but being that Brandon, I know, a big historian, I know that you were a regular chronicler of Ed Francis's 50th State Wrestling out of Hawaii. Maybe this is the year we get 51st State Wrestling, as my Canadian roots are absorbed by the U.S. and Donald Trump buys Canada, and we become the 51st state. And Wayne Gretzky
I heard.
becomes
Okay.
our prime
I was
minister.
hoping we get a chance to talk about Canadian politics here. I heard that some of your, now I've learned in the United States, the heads of states are governors, but you have first premiers,
yes,
premiers of like Ontario, and there's some discussion about possibly trading some of the United States to join Canada. That has been raised as an issue.
Yes, I think that the threat is that you and your folks are just going to gobble us up.
Now, New York has not been named as one of the possible states. I understand maybe some of the western states and things of that nature. Yeah. But that has been raised. I understand you're getting a new prime minister soon.
That is going to be the case. Our prime minister, Justin Trudeau, who has hit an incredible level of unpopularity in this country,
yes,
has announced that he is removing himself as the party leader of the Liberal Party, and we will go through a vigorous leadership race.
So you do elect your head of state.
We do, yes. We are not a we are a democracy up here in Canada. We do vote. And
you get all sorts of people talking at us now. But so I understand in the UK, the prime minister sometimes just becomes the prime minister without a popular vote happening. But sometimes they do get elected. There's a different government system than I'm used to.
Yeah, I always veer on the side of caution when I'm talking about anything UK related, because they are a very vocal bunch if you get any detail wrong. So I will take your facts as.
But I understand Justin Trudeau was trying to give you $250 checks, and his finance minister was like, and that it all went downward spiral from there.
I mean, there's been a long series of issues with Justin Trudeau. A lot of it coming through during the pandemic. A lot of backlash towards vaccine mandates. We are not as different from our counterparts as some may believe, and this has also gone with some of his immigration policies that have seen, I think, something like 3 million immigrants come to Canada, which have had some positive impact on our economy, but has also brought a lot of negatives with the volume of people that Justin Trudeau has kind of had to own as an issue. This is the exact way I wanted to start off our show. But yes, he is, and one of his biggest allies just resigned before the holidays, and this was essentially the nail in the coffin for Justin Trudeau, he is leaving kicking and screaming, but he is stepping aside. It's a very Joe Biden-esque exit.
Right. It was basically a foregone conclusion that he would lose the election if he did not step aside.
Yes, so they will have a new Liberal Party leader that will run in the next election. But the candidate on the conservative side, Pierre Poilievre, is your populist candidate. That maybe he is. I think it was something like in polling, like he would have been like 25 points ahead of Justin Trudeau if they ran. So it's a question mark of who will lead the Liberal Party in this next election, but this could be our next prime minister whenever an election is called.
Okay.
And that is your Canadian Minute here on Pollock and Thurston. Did you have a good holiday, Brandon? And where are we at going into Wild Card Weekend in Buffalo?
Bills versus Broncos. The Bills have defeated the Broncos in the playoffs before. I remember the 1991 season, so like the 92 playoffs. There is precedent for this when the Bills defeated the Broncos. I believe it was in the AFC Championship game with Carlton Bailey recovering.
How old were you in 1991?
6 or 7.
Okay, yeah,
5 or 6 actually. Yeah.
And you have memories of this?
I definitely have memories of looking at my NFL record book. But I definitely have memories of the 91 season. I have vague memories of the 90 season, the first Super Bowl season.
And of course, we do have a wild card game that will be on Peacock, correct? Coming up, I think.
I believe it.
This was like the big game that NFL had last year. I assume it is. I believe it is. The Peacock has an exclusive game coming up. So yes, we are sending out the alerts to UK fans, NFL fans. We're going to hear from everybody today. We're going to. I can't believe they didn't know what this was off the top of their head. But anyway. Yes. We are going to talk a lot about streaming on today's show. We're going to do a catch up on some of the news that fell through the cracks over the holiday break. There has been some movement, some updates in the Janel Grant case. We even have updates in the Kevin Kelly case alongside the Tate twins against AEW, Tony Khan and Ian Riccaboni. Some updates there. And of course, we will be focusing on the product that has swept the nation, that got that real moment of viral circulation electricity that every brand covets and desires. The beer that is so unapologetic about being American that it will give you the finger, as did 17,003 on Monday night. I'm talking about Hulk Hogan's Real American Beer, not available here in Canada. And there is Hulk Hogan waving the proud American flag, the similar image that he used to take down Iraq in 1991, shortly after the Bills and Broncos met in the playoffs. And Hulk Hogan coming out to plug his Real American Beer on Monday night. And LA said, get the F out to Hulk Hogan and the collateral damage that was 81-year-old Jimmy Hart, who, I mean, you know what?
This was, it was interesting to me is that WWE is a minority owner, according to their own press release of this beer company. I was doing some casual research. I understand that this is private label, so basically Hogan's company is paying someone to put beer in a can and then
what he was not cultivating this beer. He wasn't out there
deriving
the hops.
Oh. Yeah, it probably is his company, and now WWE owns a piece. And I imagine that they really wanted to advertise and sponsor WWE, and it makes a lot of sense because Hulk Hogan is a very famous wrestler, and rather than giving us cash, maybe you could give us some stock in your company. So it would be interesting to see if this continues, given Pat McAfee parodied it. Variety picked up that Hulk Hogan was booed. CNN was talking about this. What's his name?
This got the most coverage coming out of the debut on Netflix. Now I watched as much as I could of the Pat McAfee parody. I found it's a clever thing to do.
You told me you could not finish it.
No,
why could you not finish it?
It wasn't that funny, but it was timely. Was it at all surprising that Pat McAfee opted to do this? It was certainly relevant and timely and made sense for his show. But the cynic in me is stating there was no way that this man was doing this unless he clearly was reflecting the internal reaction to.
If anybody has carte blanche to get away with some stuff, it's Pat McAfee.
I think Pat McAfee is a very smart operator, and I think he knows what works for his audience, but I think he also knows that this was my question that I'm trying to get around to this is that even as a minority owner, is there any portion of WWE that looks at this as this was water cooler talk, good or bad, that there's something to gain from this, or was this just a sheer negative, this segment and the fallout to it, when this is splashed over main outlets like Variety and CNN and all other places? Here on ESPN, it's being mocked. Is WWE really batting an eye at this? Is Netflix really all that bothered by this? What do you think, several days removed from this segment that was the most talked about?
I mean, it's just not what you want, but I don't think it's terrible for them. There is some offsetting positive value for WWE. not so much for Hogan. Hogan,
No,
looks like a fool.
I view this as a Hulk Hogan problem and not so much a TKO WWE problem. Although, like, you do have the ownership stake in this company, but
it tells you like something small though that WWE thought it was a good idea to put him in that position, and certainly didn't anticipate, unless they were throwing him out there to fall on his own sword, didn't anticipate that he was going to get such a negative reaction, especially considering they're buying into this company. You couldn't have been. There's no conspiracy theories that this could have been on purpose.
And I think that they will forge ahead and put this guy on Saturday night's main event. And if anything, it's
right.
Well, how is the audience going to react to this guy? And I think that's
in
a
San
curiosity.
Antonio, correct?
San Antonio, Texas. Yes. So
it won't be as bad as LA.
No, it probably won't be. But will there be a curiosity for people if they promote Hogan and that's a selling feature of this show? Why not? If I'm TKO or WWE, it's like, well, if they cheer, they cheer. If they boo, they boo. If I'm Hulk Hogan, maybe I feel like for a guy that has been as image and brand conscious as Hogan has been, and his brand has certainly gone through quite the metamorphosis over the last decade. Maybe
just move all the sponsorship over to UFC.
You know what?
Which is much more suited for.
It's completely suited for a UFC audience. Like, here was Hulk Hogan a few weeks ago in Tampa walking out with Colby Covington, of all people, and endorsing him. Like, there is, even for all the talk that, well, this was an LA crowd, in 2 weeks, the UFC is holding a pay-per-view at the Intuit Dome. And a Hulk Hogan in that same audience in front of a LA-based crowd, I don't think he's getting that reaction in a UFC setting. Not at all. Very different audiences, and this is the most political sponsor that WWE has taken on in this incarnation, where Hulk Hogan's Real American Beer, like, there's really no sidestepping like what the attraction and what the audience is for this beer, and a WWE audience that is, at least on Monday night, was very resistant to this, given who Hulk Hogan is and the accumulation of controversies attached to him, that they were not just going to be puppets that endorsed this beer segment on Monday and made for. I think
it was especially the most recent, his involvement with the Trump RNC and endorsing Trump. Not to mention, yes, you have the racist rants that were made public about 10 years ago now, and his failures to apologize for that. But yeah, I think it was everybody got reminded of who Hogan is and what he believes in or doesn't by the presidential campaign.
Yeah, it was a fascinating segment to dissect from that side of things, because much like last year's WrestleMania, a lot of Monday was about, this is the new era of WWE, and Hulk Hogan was an avatar for the old era, and the audience made it very well known that it felt like an audience that has moved on from Hulk Hogan, and this product has moved on from Hulk Hogan, and that was, look at this.
It's the highest breakout query for things associated with WWE worldwide, and this is on the past day, but I was looking at this earlier too. It was over longer timelines. Why was Hulk Hogan booed? So make sure you get on Post Wrestling an article about Hulk Hogan getting booed if you don't have one already.
Great SEO capitalization this week on the name of Hulk Hogan. But I mean, when you compare it to other figures on this show that are hardly completely divorced from Donald Trump and a lot of this election campaign, like you have Logan Paul that does not receive these negative reactions, Mark Calloway, New Year's Eve. Did you get an invite to Mar-a-Lago like Paul Levesque and Stephanie McMahon did? Both featured on this show?
I don't have a parent who's going to be part of the cabinet. So
did you get an invite to the Netflix premiere on Monday night?
No, I didn't. I imagine, so I do get the invites for the PLEs. I have been lately. I didn't realize they were going to do a press conference here. Not that I would have flown across the country for
there was this, but, wrestling media was invited to this. I did not receive an invite. Must have been I'm in a separate country, so it's hard for email to travel over the holidays. So but they did do a press conference after the fact with John Cena, CM Punk, Rhea Ripley, and Paul Levesque fielding questions. And yes. I guess where should we start when it comes to the launch on Netflix? First of all, I thought the promotion for this launch was one of the most robust WWE has ever engaged in. It was impossible not to be aware of this. And realistically, it is when you're attached to a Netflix, and I think to a degree UFC with ESPN, there's so much embedded promotion that you receive in the sports media world that you know that a Nick Khan, that a Lee Fitting, that they are so tied to that all of these outlets, they're constantly talking about your product. And this is a business story, as a sports story, as an entertainment story. And all of the lead up to this, they just cranked it up in that final week. And I thought they did like a really masterful job of just carpet bombing your awareness across all these different platforms of WWE's move to Netflix.
The Christmas Day Netflix games had CM Punk on the desk pregame show talking about it and calling it, this is our WrestleMania, or he said this is our Super Bowl. He knew his audience. I went to families' houses and we struggled, but we got Netflix on the grandparents' TV, and you saw a big Raw graphic as soon as you turned on Netflix on Christmas Day. So there's a ton of it. You cannot avoid it. And the first thing I saw Monday night when I turned on the Netflix app was watch Raw. It's tonight. But I think this show will be somewhat different from Raw going forward. But I thought it was a real emblematic statement about sort of what WWE is now. And I told someone last night, it just hit me that do you remember the WWE Business Partner Summit from the George Barrios era when they would do their big theater presentation for all the business partners? And there would be maybe a few hundred people in a theater. And this is where we get the famous Paul Levesque, NXT is going to take over the world map and all of that.
The global localization map. This
was if you took the WWE Business Partner Summit and made it not just a stage production, but you made it a whole wrestling show. That's really what this was. And I think, I think from a fan's perspective, I think the typical fan probably liked this show. I know there's some divisiveness from maybe hardcore fans about what it was. But I thought this was a show.
This was the WWE upfronts.
Yeah.
This
was a show in LA where there's a lot of media in the Intuit Dome, the cool new venue with all the LED in it. If you're a high roller corporate type executive, don't you want to check that out and see what this is about? And Netflix, I understand, is in the Valley, so not that far away. It's like 5-hour drive, and they probably have private jets they can get to LA real quick. But this was like everything that a Nick Khan WWE show wants to be, to show everybody. And we're new in the hip thing on streaming, on the best streamer. We've got just dozens of celebrities all over the place. The likes of not only Bill Simmons seated right behind the announcers, but Lucas Shaw of Bloomberg is there. Joe Otterson of Variety is there. Our friends from Light Shed were there, posting a picture of themselves arm in arm with Nick Khan after the show.
Don't forget Matt Bellany.
Matt Bellany, of course, who's a huge wrestling fan. He loves his professional wrestling and how.
Did he go to NXT the next night?
I doubt it. Nick Khan was there though. Did you see that?
Yeah, it might have been Nick Khan's. Well, it was definitely his on-screen debut at NXT. I can't confirm if you've been to past shows, but yes, we got Dwayne Johnson.
Paul Levesque was leading an NXT chant. Nick Khan did not chant NXT at that time. I wanted to see him get into it, but maybe next time.
He's maybe brand loyal to the main roster. I mean, it was just an event that, at the very least, you're watching this, and this is it was a sell of, this is what the WWE is. This is what all of our production innovations have been working up to over the past year under Lee Fitting. If you're unfamiliar with Lee Fitting, Google. And then just showcasing this incredible launch with all of these celebrities, making it feel like the top product in, like, the new hot toy on Netflix was what this was. And it was a big, like, if that was your takeaway, like, this was secondary to presenting wrestling matches or climaxes to feuds. It was really just a showcase of who the stars are and getting as many stars on television as possible. Also on-screen appearances for the first time in WWE by Ari Emanuel and Pollock and Thurston favorite Mark Shapiro with Big D, Dwayne.
I saw Andrew Schleimer behind somebody accidentally.
Oh, was Andrew Schleimer
TV,
there
too?
CFO. Yeah. Dana White, no Dana White.
No Dana White here, unfortunately.
I thought if ever there was a Dana White on-screen appearance, it's this or it's the Vegas WrestleMania.
Big shout out from Dwayne Johnson to the co-CEOs of Netflix, as well as the chief content officer, Bella Bajaria. But the co-CEOs, do you know their names of Netflix?
Ted
quiz.
Sarandos and
Yes.
Greg. Greg from Netflix is how I know him.
Greg Peters, he's low profile. Ted Sarandos is usually the one that goes out there, but and Dwayne Johnson, and that opening too, I think, to get it out of the way for high roller types who are not wrestling fans who are watching this. It's fake. Yes, it's scripted. This is a predetermined scripted typewriter sport. And let's just get that out of the way. And I think that informed why the cold open was produced the way it was. And I think the production was pretty impressive, I thought. Just looking at it, even little things like the what do you call it? The round thing that they put on the microphone underneath the windscreen, just little things to make it different. And it's the most different, I would say, that Raw has looked in some 20-25 years. It's looked pretty similar over the last couple decades, but this looks quite different. I couldn't help but think to myself watching it, these are things that AEW should have imagined first in terms of differentiating the look and feel of their product from WWE. But I was impressed with the production. Sure.
So the other side of it is that there was also like a lot of reaction that this was like feedback we got on Monday night was that this felt like a very big, like boxing MMA presentation, like the good and the bad, where it was a heavily corporatized presentation of pro wrestling. And there's some that, I mean, we have so ingrained people, especially in combat sports, that logos and such like that makes it feel so professional. Like that's part of the landscape that is attached to boxing. It's certainly not divorced from wrestling. If you watch CMLL or like New Japan, there's plenty of corporate tie-ins and such. If you are AEW and you're watching this, are you feeding into this that the production values have just risen even that much higher, that we have to keep up with the Joneses? Or are you almost trying to go a whole different route for people that feel like this was, for lack of a better term, the WWE upfronts, that we can present something more intimate that is completely different from WWE? Because like the production is such a big part to fans of what they perceive as what is major league.
I mean, they should be, but I don't. AEW doesn't strike me as a company that's very self-aware of its own challenges and possible ways that it could improve, especially visually and on screen. So I don't expect that. But I thought the show was kind of overall kind of a perfect kind of show for very early 2025. It's sort of a reflection of culture in that this will entertain the masses as a sort of side effect. It will, but it'll also, this is meant to appeal to really rich and powerful people also. And that's kind of emblematic of the way that culture has leaned, and the masses, they're at least accepting of it, and they'll enjoy it as well. And it's not like there is going to be this big conflict unless you roll out Hulk Hogan, who will get booed if you put him in front of hundreds of celebrities, I guess.
Yeah. Again, I spoke about this on Monday. To me, it was an indication that as much as I do subscribe to the reality of the Snickers doctrine, the fan still has a place, even if it's at the bottom of that pyramid, at the widest layer of the Snickers doctrine, that in a moment like that, or when the Royal Rumble Riyadh spot is airing, that the audience still has a way to at least voice their displeasure. Whether that has any effect or impact, it's still, in a moment like that, that became a story coming out of this, was the fans' rejection of not just a figure in Hulk Hogan, but a sponsor and now a business partner in this Real American Beer. Not to mention that Netflix is also being booed in this segment with in conjunction,
because he's tearing off the shirt to reveal a Netflix shirt underneath his whatever shirt he was wearing. Yeah.
So there you have it. As of today, so in Canada, I will remind people that
to add one more thing about the overall strategy of this is that I thought it was very deliberate that they put out the press release announcing the deal with Hogan's Real American Beer and the announcement that they're running Royal Rumble in Riyadh in 2026 on the same day as there's all this information about WWE to flood out what we know that people are going to react negatively to somewhat. Not everybody's going to react negatively to it, but annoying people like us might. And I think that's, the flood the zone so that the bad stuff gets mixed in with all the good stuff and it all just washes out. I thought they could have probably announced those announcements at any time, but they chose that day for a very specific reason, I believe.
Yes. Real American beer, the perfect beverage for January 6th. And so when it comes to the rankings that we will be talking about in the Netflix era, so here in Canada, I will state where all of our programming has moved, including last night's NXT, which streamed on Netflix. As of today, on the top 10 TV shows in Canada on Netflix, Raw from Monday is listed at number 5, while NXT is number 6. Behind, do you have any idea what is number 1 in Canada?
Squid Game.
Squid Game is number 2, ceding leadership by Jerry Springer. Fights, camera, action, and then followed by the season of Missing You and The Breakthrough. So Raw 5, NXT number 6. But in the U.S.,
okay,
where has Raw placed in the Netflix rankings, Brandon? What can you tell us about what we know about the success of this show on Monday?
Well, we know that what do we have here? So the latest is that Jerry Springer. Jerry Springer must have just dropped today or something. I don't know.
It dropped on Tuesday, I think.
They're down to number 4. When I looked at this earlier, and I know Stephanie McMahon has tweeted similar, and she was referencing a Forbes article that right now Raw is number 4. But when I looked at this earlier today, it was at number 1. And if you look at yesterday, I believe it's number 1 for yesterday as well. This is just the United States. And we have no viewership numbers, by the way. I know everybody wants to know what the viewership is. My post that I put up yesterday that says in the headline, in parentheses, no ratings data, got tons of search engine clicks on it. So
is that surprising? Did you think by the time we did the show on Wednesday that there would be something out from Netflix?
Slightly, yes. I figured that they would give some sort of global number, but now, thinking it through, I can understand, because what are the 2 numbers that Netflix has disclosed recently that people do know? And it's the Jake Paul and Mike Tyson fight, whatever they now 40 million, 50 million, 60 million. And the NFL number, we know at least, and that was actually measured by Nielsen,
right.
Over 20 million viewers for that. I bet this was impressive if you could break it down to whatever we would compare it to for the USA Network. And I mean, I don't know. It also wouldn't shock me if it was slightly below what say they averaged last year for the USA Network live same day, if we were actually to compare it fairly. I guess it tells you that maybe it wasn't this massive blowaway success. There were less than 20 million people watching probably, but that's not a surprise. I was expecting something. Maybe they could find some sort of data point that would not be comparable to my spreadsheet, but you could say, wow, there were zillions of people watching this for 1 minute globally or something like that. This was the biggest this ever or something like that. But none of that. All we have is that Paul Levesque said the Netflix executives were very pleased. He was being informed, and it sounds like he lets Nick Khan analyze the numbers for him. And if Nick Khan's happy, and if the executives are happy at Netflix, then he's happy. But no numbers were dare uttered. And I think that's going to be the way it is. Even though they do have a third party called Video Amp, kind of doing what Nielsen would do in this case. But
Video Amp had a big week. They had to
that's right.
calculate the Golden Globes viewership.
The alternative to Nielsen is a little more generous than Nielsen, as it turns out.
Yes. Here is Paul Levesque during an impromptu job interview on Monday night to work at WrestleNomics HQ.
I've been told the Netflix numbers. I've been told the metrics a little bit to some degree, probably 5 different times. I still don't get it. I'm still okay, so what matters here? What matters there? It's a global product. So that one's important to you. This one's not as important. There's a lot of factors to this. For right now, I think the easiest thing for me to say to everybody in this room is, I will be happy if they are happy, right? Everything that I've heard from Nick, from them today is they are thrilled. That's good for me. Once we see where they're happy and this is, great, exceeds our expectations or whatever that was, and we get a consistent area of that, now I'll be able to say, okay, so I know what they're looking for, I know where they're looking for, and I know how. Now I'll set myself, Nick, Lee, will all set goals to this is where we want to go to now. Because they're happy here, we want to blow their minds here.
Yes, and a mention of Denise Salcedo for asking that question, which I actually thought was the best question that was asked in this press conference about what is defined as a success? What are your benchmarks? And we got that, vague answer from Paul Levesque, but at least an indication of, a lot of metrics that are being floated their way. I'm also curious, like, just what access, like Tony Khan mentioned this with Max. It's like, how much of this data are they going to be receiving as well? You would imagine it's going to be pretty, they'll get a fair amount of data, and then you have to parse through it and make sense of it all. But in the case of Tony Khan, like he indicated, like we might not even like have all of this data. Like this is all, like, Max is a lot more proprietary than Netflix is.
Yeah, I mean, I figure, though this is a weekly show, this is a new phenomenon. But I would think it's going to be along the lines of the Peacock broadcasts or the W Network itself broadcasts of the pay-per-views, PLEs, where you might get some percentage differences, but you'll never get a number. And I imagine that's what it's going to be. Now, if this information is shared broadly within WWE, maybe that will see the light of day. But I don't necessarily expect it, though I will be pursuing it and asking around and seeing if I can get some information. But we will get. So we should mention, though, what we will get. Netflix does publish this weekly. They publish it every. It's Monday through Sunday. So I'm not sure what day they actually publish it. Maybe they publish it on Mondays. They do publish this global top 10. Now they do this for every region, but they don't put viewership numbers on the chart for every region. This top 10 movies, and they also have the top 10 shows, both in English and non-English. Suffice to say that you do get what will amount to a worldwide DVR +7 measurement, essentially. So we know that, like,
which is going to be compared to the domestic numbers on Raw.
They absolutely. And so we'll get like a global number that says, I don't know, 5 million people maybe watched Raw. Without getting deep into the math, this is a pretty fair way to measure global viewership. This is basically an average minute audience, a very similar to Nielsen way to measure how many people are watching this over the course of 7 days. Not the live plus same day numbers that we're used to talking about, where Raw is viewed by 1.5, 1.6, 1.7 million people, whatever it is. So will we get comparable data? Highly doubt it.
All right. And Gordon Brown mentioning Raw still number 1 in the UK on Netflix. So there you go. The region that they have in fact conquered. And then we have, look at this, Garrett Kidney weighing in. Variety published a Raw was a historic success softball article 30 minutes ago that also included no numbers.
Yes. There's some quotes here, it looks like, from Pollock, but no viewership numbers.
Okay. It was an unqualified success. It goes beyond metrics, okay, folks. It was that big of a success. Anyway, it was a very, I think, strong introduction of the WWE brand, the WWE product, married to Netflix, and whatever your view of the quality of the show. This was very. It demonstrated, I think, what you can expect more of, and that this was the official opening the floodgates, logos on the mats, and incorporating all of these, all of the production that has been ramped up to such a degree that you're going to now be expecting to see on WWE programming itself. We also had what was represented on the mat besides Hulk Hogan's Real American Beard.
Fortnite was center, I believe. Riyadh Season was also there. Snickers of Snickers Doctrine,
of course,
was there.
Then, now, forever together.
Cricket Wireless.
Cricket Wireless was there, and a Netflix logo was on there as well.
Right. We have a question here from Jake in Windy City that you might know the answer to. Any idea what Rogers and Sportsnet is expecting with the new TNA deal, and could this lead to a good sign for any potential TV deals in the U.S.?
Well, I don't think one has to do with the other in terms of Canada and the U.S. Certainly, if you take from various comments that TNA performers and such have posted online, there's been more than one person that has noted what this will mean in the U.S., sort of like hinting at, will there be a upgrade from Access TV? Again, noting the fact Anthem Sports and Entertainment bought majority of control of Access TV, mainly to be a vehicle for TNA. But yes, so in Canada, TNA has now moved to Sportsnet 360, which was the former home of WWE programming up until December 31st. They had their first episode of Impact last Thursday, which did 36,000 viewers. It was the first week. We will see in time if that grows. It was certainly far from what WWE does on the network, including
what in the neighborhood does WWE do on the same network?
So
what were they doing
on Sportsnet? A typical week saw SmackDown doing roughly 250,000 viewers, give or take. Raw, interestingly enough, in the 2-hour era, Raw's numbers actually went down, but we're still consistently doing 180 to 210,000 viewers on a Monday night. NXT was kind of in the ballpark of your 90,000 viewers per week. So again, in TNA, 36,000 for the first week out. I don't know what the financial value of this deal is to TNA. One would surmise that I'm sure this is more so an exposure deal than it is necessarily a gigantic revenue one for TNA, which I would still implore TNA to take, because this is much more exposure for them in Canada than they were prior on the Fight Network and previously Game TV, which are Anthem sports and entertainment properties. But yeah, time will tell if they grow this audience. It's not just limited to Impact. They're also going to have other shoulder programming on Sportsnet. And it does seem like Sportsnet, they very much wanted to stay in wrestling, and they went with TNA, while AEW is now on, well, it's always been on TSN2 for Dynamite, but they have shifted Collision from the TSN Plus streaming service to now the Canadian version of the USA Network. So looks like TSN already getting ahead of the political wave and just rebranding their channels into USA, yes, like the country may in fact be.
And just to add one more detail, I did confirm with Netflix earlier today that WWE's programs, despite them being live, they're also available on demand. They will be eligible to get into that top 10, where globally we might get some numbers on the occasions, and maybe it's every week that they do end up in the top 10. So we'll see. Raw, I would think, especially because Raw is in the US as well as everywhere else.
Before we move on from WWE and its television formatting, so SmackDown last Friday didn't get as much attention. The move to 3 hours. I don't know if that had the same selling features as moving to Netflix did. This was kind of just a whispered in passing. We're moving to 3 hours. Just tune in. And here is Paul Levesque appearing on the Pat McAfee show on Monday prior to Raw and speaking about what is the length of SmackDown going to be.
The conversation's always been SmackDown 2 hours, Raw 3 hours. Now it's reversed. There is no time ending for Raw. SmackDown now 3 hours back on USA, right?
Yes, until for right now, and then it switches back to 2.
What? What? It's moving back to 2 hours? It just moved to 3. Brandon, what's going on?
So at least as of a few months ago, and I understand WrestleVotes had put this out there as well a number of months ago, SmackDown is going back to 2 hours beginning in June. So it will be 3 hours for the first 5 months. You will have to watch a 3-hour program, John Pollock. And then in June, you'll get a break. It'll be 2 hours.
What a break. 2 hours. Yeah.
Question remains whether that's every year it's going to be like that. I don't know. I would think so, but I don't know.
This is one of the more confusing television deals WWE has signed. This is very odd. Obviously, there's some logic to this, but it's very curious. And yes,
I would think, and I don't know, I would think that they view, I assume this was part of the deal, part of the deal that they worked out that was announced over a year ago. But I assume that they view it as maybe NBC Universal wanted more content, and they view it as, well, look, the first 5 months of our year not only perform better in the ratings, but also this is the time where there's the most interest in our product, and you've got people like The Rock and John Cena visiting, and we can fill 3 hours more easily rather than dragging it out through the rest of the year in the last 7 months of the year, where that might be harder and might be more of a slog. So I imagine that's the calculus, but that's just my own read of the situation.
Knowing that and this shift back in June, does it make it more or less likely, in your estimation, that the $278 million average for this contract is likely, like they're like that is the figure?
I would be shocked if they've reworked their deal and this wasn't an original part of the agreement. $287 million was reported by CNBC and by the Wall Street Journal over a year ago when the deal was announced to put SmackDown on USA Network, and I find no reason to believe that that WWE wouldn't make sure some way or another that everybody knew that they got a bigger fee out of it. I don't believe that they have.
And I think you will see this in the following weeks and months on Netflix, is that whether it's Paul Levesque, whether it's others, like there has never been this like you've heard Paul Levesque talk about the challenges of putting together a 3-hour show. I would think that USA would want as much content as possible, and it's probably WWE that even when they have the flexibility that they will on Monday nights, I don't envision them like this past Monday was a perfect example. Like this was a show that God knows the pacing of this show, it could have gone 4+ hours, and they were out at 3 hours and several odd minutes. I think they're going to
about 3:20, right?
No, it was less than that.
Okay.
It was like 3 minutes after 11 Eastern that they were off the air, and I don't think they're going to be pushing much past that. I think they understand like the challenge of 3 hours, and they are going to be of the mindset of like that 3 hours is like, I think that's going to be the longest you are going to see Raw on Monday nights, unless there's some unprecedented reason to go longer than that. But I imagine a lot of Raws will fall under that 3-hour window.
Yeah, I thought there was some interesting discussion from Paul Levesque in the press conference about how he was being asked about what's different about doing this on streaming on Netflix versus other TV networks. And he was explaining how there's more flexibility with the commercial breaks. And I can understand that when you're bound to time slots and there's a show that's got to come on after you, that you've got to get a certain amount of ad time within your 3 hours or whatever it is. And there's not that sort of rigidity to a broadcast on Netflix. Maybe they do have more flexibility. I imagine they've got to have a certain amount of ad time still nonetheless, because that's a large part of the reason why Netflix is having them on. But it does sound like there's more flexibility in the production of the show.
And did you have ads on Monday?
Well, it turns out I'm on an ad-free tier.
Okay, so even ad-free tier, like you, because I was curious if they were
still
going
ads.
to.
I saw the packages that you were seeing in Canada.
Right. And on NXT on Tuesday, it's interesting. Like they do have breaks, but what we got was like if it was in the body of the match would just continue. But there were like actual commercial breaks where instead of, you weren't getting commercials, but we would just get images of various NXT wrestlers and a countdown clock of when the show was going to resume. So it would go to like 3 minutes and 30 seconds and you'd have a countdown clock during.
There were some picture-in-picture ad breaks, but I think that's normal for NXT last night on the CW.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. Anything more on Netflix? We had John Cena on the show confirming a 36-date schedule for this year, and what is going to be a merchandise powerhouse as he goes to every market with the city's sports colors, and they are going to make a mint off of John Cena IP this year. And
new gate record, which is
right.
They don't announce. I think this is similar to the calculus about why they don't announce a viewership number, because they don't want it to be compared to the NFL or Tyson Paul. They don't want these gate numbers, I think, to be, even though they've broken this record a number of times in a row now. It's probably not quite up to what the UFC numbers are, their sister company, which can be upwards of $17-18 million for an arena gate.
And they're probably going to shatter this Intuit Dome record in 2 weeks when they run a pay-per-view there.
UFC will.
UFC will.
So the in terms of a number, though, the last number, that the highest ever, not adjusting for inflation, gate for an arena by WWE that we have is $3.3 million converted to US for the London Money in the Bank in 2023. So it's presumably this is well over $3.3 million now that they've broken this record in France for Backlash, in Berlin for Bash in Berlin, and there might be even one other time where they've done this.
Let us move on to some other stories. Let's talk about these legal updates, starting with the Janel Grant case that we are coming up on almost a year since this suit was filed, just 2 days after the announcement that WWE was moving to Netflix. And over the holiday break, we had several updates, including Janel Grant's side filing that they will be amending this case. And we also have a new player that has been introduced to oversee this case.
Well, we have a new judge. So up to this point, let's get into the weeds. Jeffrey A. Meyer has been the judge overseeing this civil lawsuit. But there is a new judge. Her name, I will remind myself of, Sarah F. Russell. Now it comes to mind. So she is a new federal judge who was nominated by Joe Biden. It was a lengthier than usual process because I guess she had signed a letter supporting during the pandemic, supporting the governor of Connecticut to release prisoners over the age of 55. In any case, she's a brand new judge for Connecticut federal court, and she has now been assigned this case. Does that mean anything? I don't know. Not really. Not to speak of at this moment. There was also an update that Grant's side is looking to amend their complaint There was some communication that was disclosed as part of an exhibit in a filing between the Grant side and the defendant side. And it ultimately resulted in the defendants refiling their motions to get this case out of public court and out of public view and into private arbitration, which is the big hurdle that's going to have to be tackled here for the Grant side. So that has happened. They have refiled their motions to compel because this case was on hold, remember, for 6 months from June to December. That stay has been lifted. That stay has expired. But Ann Callis, Janel Grant's lead attorney, has said that they are going to amend their complaint. I believe they're going to do this by January 15th. Don't know what that will consist of, but I imagine they're going to make some different arguments. I've questioned if we know that there's been litigation involving Dr. Kolker and Peak Wellness. I don't know if he will become more involved in this case or not. But that is a question. And we have asked Janel Grant's representatives if that might be a part of it, but they have not addressed that. So that'll be a story about a week from now, presumably, when they amend their complaint. And imagine there'll be a lot of litigation about what public policies might apply to Grant in this case. The defense has already anticipated a lot of different acts and have already argued why those should not apply in this case and should not get her out of arbitration.
Do you read anything into the fact that the stay being lifted and this case being amended both happened to land on Wednesdays?
Is this a conspiracy against AEW?
No, I think it's directly as just feeding the show and
I see. To catch us off guard.
Yeah, but let's go with the AEW conspiracy. That would get way more engagement, I think.
Yes.
In terms of this is a detail that you and I have spoken about, but just maybe reiterating an aspect to all of this is at the core here is if this goes to arbitration and the fact that the NDA is held up and that the venue for this is arbitration. The NDA was signed in January, and in the suit filed by Janel Grant, she alleges of a incident with Vince McMahon that occurred in March. And I know
she doesn't put a date on it, but presumably she's
after the signing of the NDA. And I think that's
explicit that it is after the signing of the NDA. Yes.
And I think that's a real relevant question. And you've brought it up numerous times is that would the NDA cover an alleged act that occurred after the signing?
The language says
of the NDA.
The language says this covers everything on this day that it was signed, which I believe is January 28th, 2022, and anything prior. NDAs, at least this NDA, and I don't know if you could have a tenable legal argument to say this covers you in perpetuity, that you can't disclose any events that happen in perpetuity. So there is, Janel Grant does allege that she was assaulted an additional time by Vince McMahon at Vince McMahon's apartment in Connecticut, and that's what she alleges. You can read it in its graphic detail in her complaint. So that does seem to, that does seem to complicate this case to me, but I've not been informed that or tipped off on that by anybody, but that's just my reading and thinking about how this legal maneuvering might go.
As I have heard over this last year from important people in the world that Brandon Thurston might have missed his calling, not going to law school. I've been told understanding that has impressed a lot of legal.
I've been told that by some people who are trying to butter me up, maybe. But no, I do think about that and have regrets perhaps on a daily basis that I have not go to law school.
The pro wrestling beat way more lucrative,
right? Thank God I'm posting charts and graphs and covering legal stories for wrestling fans instead. You're welcome.
Well, at the end of the show, we will talk about the newly formatted the WrestleNomics report, a must read for everybody.
I thought you were going to tell me you're going to talk to me about a tuition program from Post Wrestling to send me to law school. Okay,
we might. Maybe we'll have our own next in legal line program. But staying on the legal front, what is the update regarding the Kevin Foote / Kevin Kelly Tate twins lawsuit?
We have filings that just came out before we went to air here. This case started off in Pennsylvania State Court, got moved to Pennsylvania Federal Court, has been moved now at the request of AEW, and the judge agreed, and now it is moved into Florida Federal Court. In any case, AEW refiled their motion to compel arbitration. similar to the Grant case, this is an issue of arbitration. The talent contracts say if you got a legal dispute, if you got a dispute of some sort, that it's supposed to be resolved in arbitration, not in public court. Nonetheless, the plaintiffs here, who are Kevin Kelly and the Tate twins, have filed a lawsuit against AEW, Tony Khan, and Ian Riccaboni, alleging, among other things, defamation and breach of contract, etc. Filed a lawsuit, but their talent contracts do contain an arbitration clause, so it will be up to the judge probably ultimately to decide whether or not this case should go to private arbitration or whether it should go to whether it should continue in public court. And AEW has simply refiled their motion to compel arbitration because now they're in a new venue and they have not yet filed their motion to compel arbitration yet in this venue where the case will continue.
Over to New Japan Pro Wrestling. They held 2 shows at the Tokyo Dome with Wrestle Kingdom 19 drawing 24,107. That's the number that New Japan reported. And then the following night, Wrestle Dynasty, 16,300. And so a combined audience between the 2 nights of just over 40,000. And the stories coming out of the show, Gabe Kidd and Kenny Omega maybe having
great match. I heard. I did kind of put it on my phone and listen to the commentary back. So you
did seek out the commentary after the
fact. I did have to seek out the commentary.
But the number one
they got
story,
my $9.99 that way. They got it one way or another.
The number one story, the number one newsmaker coming out of this year's Dome shows was Chris Charlton, as I expected, to be quite honest. So this was obviously the source of controversy was the commentary by Chris Charlton on the second night of the Tokyo Dome shows, primarily in the Kenny Omega Gabe Kidd match, which included Chris Charlton making numerous attacks on AEW. He was paraphrasing Gabe Kidd's remarks in the lead up to this, which we will play a portion of as well, just for context, because I wonder how many people were aware of this. But I mean, the statements that got the most focus was a reference to Tony Khan as a money mark of signing all of these New Japan talents and doing nothing with them. There was also a comment later in the main event between Zack Sabre Jr. and Ricochet about the Continental Classic. I mean, please. It's no G1, essentially. I mean, I took all these comments. I talked about this earlier this week. I kind of want to get Brandon's thoughts on it. Like, in a nutshell, I found the commentary to be like, it was distracting at times. I felt Chris was really over the top during a lot of this. It was so far removed from Chris Charlton's usual demeanor, and I'm one that
it's not commentary like he's a heel, right?
He's never in that role. I understand like okay, you're doing this intra-promotional deal. My thought is when the commentary is the story, it should never be the focus. It should not
contrast
overshadow.
To when New Japan was doing stuff with Noah and you were having Noah stars against New Japan stars. Was there similar sort of anti-Noah commentary from Chris
Charlton? Was, and there were complaints about that too between Kevin Kelly and Chris Charlton, because on those shows from, I believe it was 2022 around this time of the year, you had the Noah English commentators, and you had the option of listening to the New Japan commentators, and they were very different. Like Kevin Kelly and Chris Charlton, they played like this is our home team, and they called the show from a very pro New Japan standpoint, which is like you can philosophically debate what is right for an interpromotional type of deal. The same can be applied here. But the fallout of all of this was very negative, and it has resulted in a 2-month suspension for Chris Charlton, who has not spoken publicly about this. I mean, there was I believe a tweet that he had put out that was since removed, along with a photo with Kenny Omega. That is his last post as well. New Japan has not spoken publicly about this yet. And it is worth noting that in addition to just his commentary duties, Chris Charlton works in the office for New Japan as well. And I would not think that is removed from the situation, and that he, obviously, let's play first these comments from Gabe Kidd. This was from a promotional video leading into the match with Kenny Omega.
All the people in his company queuing outside Tony Khan's office. Oh, I can't do that. Oh, I can't do this. You're a bunch of egotistical nerds is what you are. It's embarrassing. The whole thing's embarrassing. I don't want anything to do with AEW. If New Japan, this is my plan. If New Japan want to take it to the next level and regain the top spot as the top wrestling company, to off AEW. because they're just embarrassing nerds that aren't helping us. They take, don't give anything back, so f*** them. I don't give a shit if AEW want to sign me. What? So I can go and turn up to TV, be Tony's new toy, go on Dynamite, have a couple of matches, and then sit and eat catering for 23 weeks, doing f***all, flying to Toledo, Ohio, to do what? A show in front of a crowd that have seen 5 hours of wrestling already. Like, I have no interest in that whatsoever. Wrestling to me, I'm a professional, but wrestling means more to me than these guys, and I think it's about time that someone with New Japan stepped up and had some f***ing balls. We are getting our pants pulled down and bogged by the rest of the wrestling world because of being professional. So maybe it is time to be a little bit unprofessional. Maybe it is time to talk a bit of shit. And if they have anything to say about it, they can come and chat to me. I have no problem pulling Tony Khan into office and telling him what's what. I have no problem reading him his rights and telling him what idiot he is. So that's that.
That's that.
Gabe Kidd has been suspended too, right?
No suspension for Gabe Kidd, who is headlining Battle in the Valley this coming weekend.
I can add to. I know there's a report that Chris Charlton has been suspended indefinitely. I've been told that is not accurate, and I assume that the 2-month suspension is accurate.
Yes, myself included. So, yeah, I'm just going to say this. I think there's a lot of aspects to the story that are unknown, that what direction or lack thereof Chris Charlton had sent into this match. I will say this, is that if you are Chris Charlton and you're kind of going into what is the story of this match, and you're watching this promotional video that your company has put out, he ramped it up to 11 on his commentary, but it was much more a reflection of Gabe Kidd, who was the default representative of New Japan in this match. So I think it becomes a complicated one. I did not think this was a punishable offense, as much as I felt it was a distraction to the match, and I think it at sometimes was like overshadowing aspects of it. But nonetheless, that's the fallout with Chris Charlton. And at the end of the day, New Japan felt like, this is a business partner of ours, and there was collateral damage here, and it was on Chris Charlton. But also, I think you can question like Chris Charlton's judgment call here, and it's tough when you're on commentary. Like, what is the line? Typically, you're not going to know what the line is until you cross it, and obviously it was here. So
I understand, AEW had no input on this. That was reported by Fightful, which is not surprising, right? AEW does not control New Japan, maybe contrary to Gabe Kidd's promo, but that makes sense. I guess the key question for me. And by the way, I did talk to Karen Peterson, who reviews New Japan for Post, who's lived in Japan. I was asking her to inform me about the culture, and there may be some cultural differences about business that are not as normal to our Western society, where there's maybe a very protective relationship when it comes to business relationships. Of course, that business partners, as we talked about, are extremely important here in the West and the United States, but maybe it's even more sensitive.
And very different, I think, the leeway that they're obviously going to give a Gabe Kidd versus someone who works in their office and is more so, in their mind, a representative of the company on this broadcast, and not like a wrestler that is like, whether you feel that's a double standard or not, that seems to be the case here, because like there was no issue on how Gabe Kidd promoted this match.
So the key question to me would be, is that did anyone from AEW or did Tony Khan complain to New Japan? Did they let New Japan know that they were unhappy with this? And is that what led to the suspension? And would the suspension have happened if there wasn't any issue raised by AEW, if there was in the first place? But given Tony Schiavone's tweet that he quickly deleted, expressing his displeasure with Chris Charlton, it certainly sounds like those on the AEW side were not happy about his commentary.
Well, I think, and that is a lingering question of like their unhappiness over it versus demanding any kind of action taken. But it does appear like ultimately this comes down to New Japan. New Japan made this decision with Chris Charlton, who, I mean, it was, I feel this ended up becoming a bigger story than really it needed to be. Like, certainly in the fallout of the match, this was focused on. I think by Monday, this is just a nothing story to most people, and they did provide a lot more oxygen to this story by, issuing a suspension.
If AEW or Tony did complain about this, I don't think it reflects well on them. It sort of expresses that, we can't take a work. Like, I think, as I told you after this started to break, like, I've been there a lot when you got somebody cutting a promo on you And I've have felt insecure in my life as a wrestler, and somebody's like cutting too close to the bone to me, and I'm like feeling like, this is undermining the match, right? And I know what that feels like, to feel like somebody is saying something that is not productive and that it's actually undermining me. And I know what it feels like to be unhappy about that. But sometimes those insecurities are a little bit over magnified in the self. And pro wrestling, I think, is best when it's playing off of reality. And I don't think anything that Chris Charlton, he'll tell me otherwise, but I don't think anything Chris Charlton was saying was minimizing the importance or the star power or the interest and the excitement about what AEW is, but was building up this issue between Gabe Kidd and Kenny Omega, or this other issue between, I know he's saying things about the Continental Classic, but building up the heat between AEW and New Japan.
Maybe it was referring to Bryce Remsburg as a corrupt referee. Maybe that was the line was crossed.
Maybe I know people are investigating that 3 count that he gave Chris Harrington for the DDT Iron Man Heavyweight Championship.
Yes, I mean, look at this. The cage match profile of a WrestleNomics alumni.
Is there a cage match profile?
Growing.
Yeah.
I would think he deserves one. He's a championship holder.
2 matches there. Yeah.
All right, that's the latest on the New Japan front. And before we wrap things up, Brandon, we have a new member of the Meta Board of Directors, and his name is Dana White, someone that has a strong belief in the power of social media and AI. And what was the first order of business for Mark Zuckerberg in 2025? No more fact checkers. Fact checking is too politicized. Community notes, that's the way to go. And welcome to the new America that Mark Zuckerberg is more than happy to lead himself into. What do you think about fact checking being a politicized area?
I logically, I can see, the first thing that people are going to say is, who's going to fact check the fact checkers? Who's going to cover the journalists? And this is a circular argument that it's hard to overcome. But
the other day I was at the intersection at a red light, and I was thinking to myself, is this a red light? I want confirmation that this is a red light, because if not, I'm going to go into traffic. I'm going to go into the intersection. I'm going to interpret.
And you never know if what you see as red is actually purple to somebody else. There's people who have color blindness issues, and they see colors differently. So there's at least that. Or you could just be, sort of in this relative situation where what I call blue is actually red to you, and vice versa. So we just don't know, and that could be totally logically consistent with everything that we describe in the world.
I would ask the question: prove to me that that's not purple.
Yeah. How do you do it?
Prove to me this.
How do you know that this is not a simulation?
This is my truth. Okay.
How do you know that?
Don't censor me.
How do I know?
Don't silence me.
That I'm not the only one who actually exists in the world, and everybody else out there is just a figment of my imagination.
Well, there you go, folks. Facebook.
More early modern philosophy next week.
I love it. I love it. So there you go. Dana White on the board of directors. Congratulations. That is that.
He loves social media too. He said he's excited to. The thing he loves to do is build brands, and he loves social media. So he doesn't sit on any board of directors, right? He's not a TKO board member. So I think this is the first time he's ever going to sit on a board, and his statement reflected that. So I'm not interested in sitting on boards unless yes.
There you go. Karen Peterson weighing in the chat. This is the interactivity you get on Pollock and Thurston, where you get these are our community notes. Okay, it's all living in the chat room, so that is where you can go. All right, I think we've done a pretty good job here of catching everyone up to speed. What I want to bring everyone up to speed on is some changes at WrestleNomics, and we have got the launch of the WrestleNomics report, which has we are now 2 editions into. Tell me a little bit about this change in delivery method, and for those out there that just they need the dulcet tones of one Brandon Thurston. There is the occasional audio accompaniment to these reports.
So far, we're 2 issues in, and I've done 2 audio editions of it. This is instead of now the WrestleNomics radio podcast that I used to do on Sundays. But again, I have just been reading it in audio. If that will do it for you, it's a newsletter where I go over Here's some stats about the state of the business, keeping you up to date on all the data, attendance, TV ratings to the extent that they're available, and other things. In addition to all the whatever I choose are the big stories for the week to write on. This is where my opinion piece about the Nick Khan and Lee Fitting came from, and just to try to do some more written reporting that I think is the sort of good reporting and maybe, can I say the J word, journalism, that will hopefully inform people and cover the kind of information that needs to be covered in pro wrestling.
Yeah, I really encourage you, if people want a sample of the kind of work that Brandon is doing.
The first one was free.
Yeah, the first one was free, and we did post his opinion piece on the Lee Fitting situation that I think everyone should spend some time to read. I thought it was a really engaging look at things and a story that, quite frankly, it just got so little coverage, and I think that is a question worth asking about as well. Like, it was such a, in the grand scheme of things, we talk about often these PR strategies and not addressing things and being silent. In this case, like, everyone moved on pretty much from this story, and there to end the big launch on Netflix was our introduction of credits on Raw with Pollock and Lee Fitting.
Yes, it's a little bit too into the weeds and complicated. If you can't sum something up in at least less than 11 seconds, it's pretty hard to make people care about it, I guess, if it's a little too complicated. But I do think it's reflective of the fact that apparently, and according to PW Insider, WWE knew why Lee Fitting left ESPN, which was because of allegations of sexual harassment. And that's one instance where Nick Khan has been accepting of somebody who's had that sort of track record. Jamie Horowitz in 2021 is another. I've gone back and listened to his Bill Simmons interview from January 2023, where he was really supportive of Vince McMahon, despite the board having just finished their investigation around all the allegations surrounding Vince and the culture itself, and saying things like, "I applaud Vince for coming back in the way that he did." I think it just raises questions about what the ethical standards are for hiring not just run-of-the-mill employees, not just people who are interns coming in at the entry level or the mid-level managers, but people who are some of the biggest executives, EVPs, which is one of the highest titles you can have in WWE. And what sort of standard there is for who we're hiring, particularly when we've just gone through probably the biggest scandal in WWE history, and it's related to sexual misconduct.
Yeah, it was surprising to me in the sense that this was not like this was some obscure report. This was in the New York Times and The Athletic by two very well-known reporters in Katie Strang and Andrew Marchand. And this involves someone who was looked to be a lifer at ESPN, that is, WWE in the wake of not one, but two related lawsuits as it involves trafficking. And I just thought like the follow-up is sometimes as important as the initial story. Like, you can report something that is big, but if no one picks up on it and there's no discussion afterwards, like, these things tend to just, go like tumbleweeds. And that was the case here, where it just seemed like this was not a story that landed with people, and there was not that kind of discussion that I think stories like this are required to have. Like, there's one thing that, you can have your places that like aggregate story, but if there's no real discussion, there's no questioning of Paul Levesque, like what was the thought process when you hired him? Like, what was there a discussion about this? Like, we will not know what that is.
And I'm not even saying that, even people like Lee Fitting, and we're not even saying, do we believe the allegations? I don't know. But maybe when you're just coming out of this was a hire that was made, I believe, 1 year ago today. They announced it, that Lee Fitting was being hired to take over many of the duties of Kevin Dunn. And, Vince is back in the company, and maybe that's a factor that, well, he came back and it's not that big of a deal. But when you're coming out of that big scandal, maybe you would be a little bit more defensive and internalize that maybe we should, be especially cautious and hire executives who do have a clean track record. Maybe if we had not just gone through this less than a year ago and the investigation wrapped up a couple months ago, maybe we can, give somebody like Lee Fitting a chance here, despite why he left his previous job. But that wasn't a deterrent. That wasn't enough to break the deal for Nick Khan.
All right. On that note, we are going to bid everyone a farewell, and I'm going to be back tonight with Wei Ting, and we are also making some adjustments over at Post Wrestling. Moving forward, we are going to be doing our live streams on after Raw, after Dynamite, after SmackDown, exclusive at postwrestlingcafe.com. But then the show review itself will be available free for all viewers and listeners after the fact. We are going to be including the entirety of the show, our XL versions, over at postwrestlingcafe.com. And we're doing a special offer this month where if you sign up for an annual subscription, you get a free month out of it. So that deal is up at the end of January. So if you want to give it a sample, it's $6 a month to sign up. And we are going to be starting off with Dynamite tonight and continuing this week with our Rewind Away show, chronicling the 1989 feud between Ricky the Dragon Steamboat and Ric Flair. So that is coming up this week as well. All right. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. We're back every single Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time on the WrestleNomics and Post Wrestling platforms. And we'll speak with you next week.